like to introduce Dr. Deborah Lyles.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Tom. Can everybody hear me? Thank y'all so much for coming out tonight, and let me get back in the light. I've been instructed to stay in the light. I'm a walker. Thank you, Tom, for having me and for tracking me down and asking me to come.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes.
This program is in joint partnership with the Collin County Genealogical Society. Would their members stand?
That should be everybody in the audience, just about.
About half. Thank y'all for coming, and thank y'all for participating.
How do I get this PowerPoint back up here? That one right there? There we go. Thank you so much. So, as Tom kindly introduced me, I'm the W.K. Gordon Endowed Chair. So I actually have a really cool gig. I get to teach at Tarleton State University, and I get to work with the W.K. Gordon Center in Thurber, Texas. If you've ever been to Abilene, we're that smokestack on the way. Please stop in, see us, come by, visit. We preserve all the history of Thurber, Texas, which used to be a coal mining and a brick making community. I'm sure you've heard about Thurber bricks at some point in time. We made millions and millions, well, we didn't, they did, millions and millions of bricks, which went all over town and all the way down to Cuba as well, as far as paving streets. I'm going to talk to you tonight a little bit about wills and probate records. Studying dead people is great. I love it. We don't have to put up with arguments or do anything else. We can just kind of make up stories. But one of the great things I like in wills and probate records is the obvious. It's what it says. So let's start at the beginning. And let's talk about wills. So wills are created by living people, right? Before you die, you're going to create a document. You're going to decide who gets, as Tom said, that skillet or that $3 or that bed or whatever else you've got left that you want to give to somebody. It's going to express that individual's wishes for disposing of the goods that they worked for throughout their lives and who they want to benefit from that work. Often you see lists of relatives. Sometimes you'll see friends. A lot of times you'll see in-laws or outlaws or however you want to term them. You can also see who they trust as executors. I don't know if you've ever had to look for an executor of your will. It's not always an easy task, and sometimes it's a hard ask, but you can see people who are asked to be the executor of the will and make sure that those goods are given to whoever they're supposed to go to. It also expresses the value of property, and I have property in quotation marks because the definition of property will change. I study 1845 to 1865. That's primarily my area of research, and so property in that respect also includes enslaved people. So you will get to hear a little bit about enslaved people during this lecture, or talk. Let's not call it a lecture. Sometimes these wills are easy to read. Sometimes they're easy to execute. Sometimes they're complicated. I don't know if you've ever been involved with a complicated will where there are 16 children and however many people, the downlines from there, right? Who knows what they're going to get. And sometimes they're also difficult to absorb. Sometimes they pass things on like enslaved people. And that's hard for us in this day and age to understand how that can even be something that you would consider doing. So let's start at the very beginning, which of course is where in the world are you going to find these wills? So for me, these wills, I go all over the state of Texas, and I go to all the different courthouses. And so this one in particular, if I can make my point work, there's my pointer. Can y'all see it right up at the top, Atascosa County? Do y'all know where that is? It's way down south. It's about 3 counties in from the Rio Grande River, right? So Atascosa County, and this is a deed book. You'll find these in all the county clerk's offices. You'll see these throughout the state, throughout the United States. Deed records are going to be kept in the county clerk's office. And in every single case, you will see so here you have the grantor. Grantor, an easy way to remember grantor is sellor. So this is the person who is actually doing the selling or the giving. Grantee is somebody who is purchasing or inheriting, right? So the grantor, and here's the grantee, and if you look down this column right here, you will see right here, there's the last will, right? Often it's not just last will, it's just will. And if you look on here, you can see it's Mr. John Castleman. And this is the grantee, so this would be somebody who would be inheriting this property. And in this column right here, always make sure if you take photographs that you include this dandy piece of information right here, because if you ever want to document where something came from, or if you want to find it, which is a really good thing. It's interesting to find them listed, but you actually want to read them, right? So this would be in Book A. See the ditto mark? So that's the same thing all the way down. And page 36, so A36. A word of wisdom from experience. Don't take a picture of, say, this part of the paper, because then you won't realize what book it comes from when you go to look for it, and you'll go to document it later, and you're like, well, what book did that come out of? So always make sure you get the top of the page. So here it is. It's Book A, just like it said, and we're going to go to page 36. And this is a great example of one of those wills. It's really easy to understand. This right here, last will and testament of John Castleman, who is obviously deceased at this point. And he's just setting out what he wants to do. He knows his memory's faulty and all this other stuff. And he wants to pay his debts. That Amanda Pendleton, who's not listed who she is, but she gets his saddle, horse, and bridle, and then his mother will get the rest until she dies, and then it goes to his brother, Jacob Castleman, and that Jacob is also the executor, and you'll see his signature right here, except right here you see the X. What does that mean? He couldn't read or write, or he couldn't write, right? And right down here it says NB as far as a note. The mark appears because he could not see to write. So this kind of tells me he might have been having some visual problems this time. Could be related to age, could not. Could just be he was a younger man and just couldn't see. But either way, he anticipated the end of his life, and so he made out this will. This is an easy will. Nothing to it. This is who got it. This is where it went. End of story on this one. Falls County, so I always take a picture of the outside of the books also. So this is an index to deeds. This is A through Z, and you can see here on this side, 1835 to 1893. When you go into the courthouse, if you go into the county clerk's office, if they don't have them digitized, you'll see the long countertops where they have all these books in them. Don't be scared of them. Just always look for the index. Right? That's what you're going for. You're looking for that index. And that index will have what you're looking for. So here it is. And I like this example too. So A through Z. So of course here we're looking for Pickens, right? She is the grantor. Somebody switched it around. And grantee. So we're looking for Ann Pickens. We weren't looking for her, but here she is. She's listed as a will. And I want to know what she's given away. So again, what book are we looking for right here? I can't see that far. I think it's F, and then page 187. So let's go look. And don't worry, there won't be a test. This is 187, 188, or 167. 160. I have a pair of glasses right here, but I'm not going to use them. So obviously, this is a long will. We're not going to go over it. I'm going to narrow it down for you. And so just like Mr. Castleman's will, right? She wants to first pay her debts. Well, how is she going to do that? Usually we don't associate women with having a lot of property at this time. We usually think about women having their husbands or a portion of their husbands or having access to some of that. But back in the 1850s, we have a tendency to think about these women sort of being at the mercy of the man, if we will, as far as that money goes. But if you look right here, she's actually wants to pay her debts, so she has her own, out of the sale of the stock of her cattle, right? So what is she? She's a rancher. She owns plenty of her own cattle. And that's going to kind of stick in my mind. I'm going to want to look into that in just a little bit. So she's got two nieces listed in here. So one of them is going to be Sally Leah right here. So Sally Leah, and she's going to give her hogs. Now, this may not sound like a great gift, but hogs were actually worth some money. And so she's going to deed, she as a woman is going to deed some livestock to another woman, so a woman would have her own property. She also gives her some land later on. I'll show you that in a minute. She's also going to deed Mary Ann Wright, who is going to be her executor, and if you look at it, it's actually her niece number one. Niece number two is Sally. Mary Ann will get the rest of the stock and some land. So what can we deduce right here from From Miss Pickens, well, she's done quite well for herself. She's managed to raise enough money that she's got her own land and she's got some livestock, and that she also wants Marian Wright's children's as part of the beneficiaries to get land and stock also. Well, at this point in time, Marianne didn't have any children, so she's just making allowances for later on that they were going to get this money, right? Because she's not actually dead yet. This is just her will. I love this example because it's women helping women, right? We're giving them an upper hand, and we're providing for them so that they actually have to not be bound to a man, whether they were married or not, and they could actually have their own property. But page 2 kind of offers a different look at this. So here's page 2, and we look at Miss Pickens, and we also see that she owns enslaved people, or that she claims to own enslaved people. And so what she also does here, see, my Negro's a boy named Alfred, and a girl named Caroline, and a boy named William, a girl named Mary, and a boy named Clifton. And these are going to go to Marianne. And one of the things that you will also see when people willed enslaved people to others is it wasn't just a case of willing them to the next person. You will see that she will also deed them to the children of the people she inherits them to, right? Or that she bequeaths them to. So it's not just a case of giving somebody something. It's giving through the generations, which is one of the reasons slavery was such a big problem in the United States, is that it was generations, and it was assumed that it would last that long, among many other reasons. Also, Sally Lee will inherit a boy named Alexander, and then she also gets 245 acres of land. So she's really setting her nieces up really well. So this is what I mean about part of hard to absorb. Some of the times you'll see this material in documents. So some of the things I want to research now that I know that she's deeding this stuff to other people, she's giving this to other people, well, how much did she have and what was she doing? So I'm going to look through it. I'm going to look through the land documents. I want to see how much land she had and who she bought them from, which I did in part, but I also want to look for livestock. And this is one of those great examples of sometimes when we transcribe things, it didn't actually come out right. So in the 1930s, middle of the Depression, one of the projects that was done during this time was people went into county courthouses and they went through the deed records and they transcribed some of these records. So if you go into them and you see where they're typed up, obviously they weren't using typewriters back in the 1850s, but somebody went through during the Depression and typed all these records up. And they also went through some of these index records and they typed them up also. And this is a great example of sometimes they got it wrong. So here we go, and I am looking for Miss Wright, right? Because I want to know where she got this cattle from. So here she is, Mary Wright, and she's listed on page 590, which is actually, you can see it right here, D590. But look who they had as the grantee. Kind of messed that up, and this is on the person that transcribed this during the Depression. They actually put William Wright as the person that was buying this. It's a bill of sale. CBS is a bill of sale, and what we actually see if we read it, known to all these men by these presents, blah 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 blah, that George Sanders of Nueces County. So Nueces County is a long way from here, but it wasn't that far from Falls County. And they sold to Mary Wright, wife of Isaac Wright, 70 head of horses, right? 65 mares were included in there, 7 colts, and 2 horses. All of the said stock are branded. That looks like a JHP, and some are Spanish and some are American, for $1,950. So Mary Wright gave $1,950 for 70 head of horses, right? So remember when she's deeding those horses to somebody, she was deeding them to her niece. This is some valuable stuff. If you look at the $1,950, if you do the inflation calculator, that's $67,000 worth of livestock she's giving to somebody else. You rarely see bills of sales for hogs, but they usually ran $2 to $3 a piece. give that over, and again, it's valuable property. Cows, $6 to $8 a piece, usually when they inherited those. So again, it's money in the bank. And these are the things that you need to look for when you find those wills, right? It's not just a case of finding out who got what. You need to fill that backstory in. What was it worth? Who's listed? What are the documents can you find to build on to that will that you just found? So wills get complicated, especially here in Texas, because we not only have Anglo law, right? And if you're tracking your family down from, say, New York, when you're coming through, most of the time you're just looking at Anglo law. When a woman got married, basically everything was in the man's name. That's where the property went. But in Texas, we also have Spanish law. And Spanish law is why women get to own their own property here in Texas, just like they do in any other state that had Spanish rule before they had Anglo law. Of course, we're going to have exceptions. We still have exceptions. We have that common law property when you buy it together. And you also have inherited property. And who does that go to? Is it jointly? A lot of the times you'll see in wills that it's only for the use of the woman. It's only for the use of the man. It's not, especially when you see with women, it's not for the use to pay off the husband's debts. I'm not sure if they're calling him a scoundrel or what they're calling him at that point. But you can definitely tell that people are taking care of different members of their families, right, for different reasons. You'll also see that men and women will file separate property declarations before they get married. And I always think this is interesting as well. And it goes along with the inheritance value of this. So this is Buck Berry's wife. Buck Berry was a ranger on the frontier. He lived in Bosque County. And when he got married, his first wife was Sarah. And they got married, Sarah Appelis Berry, they got married. And she made her own declaration of what she owned before they got married. Right? So that if at any point in time he died, he could not give her property away. This is her stuff. Don't touch my stuff. What I find interesting is that she died, not that I'm finding that interesting. She died, and then he went to get married again, and he moved up to Young County. And when he moved up to Young County, he also filed a separate record of his property before he got married, right? What I find interesting in this, aside from the fact that the man and the woman, which is rare for them both to file separate property agreements, when you look at what happened, the enslaved people that Miss Berry owned have been transferred to him before he got married, and he's making sure that he claims them as his separate property before he gets married, right? And you can see the transfer. I got real busy last night, somewhere around 10 o'clock. Changing them over. The only people I couldn't see is Caesar, seems to be a new purchase that he made before he remarried, and Vina, I can't find her anywhere. And of course, a lot of these courthouse records will burn in due time, and so we can't always find that transfer of property. I'm still looking for her to find out where she was, and I'm still looking to find out where he purchased Caesar. I'll find it. I'm just not sure when. But keep in mind, again, when you're looking at wills and you're looking at probates, that sometimes the property that they declare together is not going to be separated in a will or in probate records. So probates. Probates are like the gold mine. You want to find the probate records. These are great things to find. It's a case record. It's not just, it's usually one envelope inside a box that you'll find in the court records. And inside this one envelope, there are lots of little receipts, lots of names, lots of events, and they will document this person's life after they were dead, right? But it's records that were created after they're dead, and it traces what they were doing when they were alive. So they're created by deceased people, where before the wills are created by living people. Now these probate records are basically created by dead people. You'll see the debts that are collected against an estate, how they were paid, any disputes. There's always going to be a dispute somewhere. Sometimes it gets ugly, sometimes it's great. Surviving children requiring care. Sometimes a man will die and his wife is left to take care of the children, and she has to do certain things to satisfy the court as an executor of his estate. She has to take care of these kids. She has to show the court how she's taking care of the kids. And sometimes a man has to do the same thing. And so you'll see the guardians of the minor children and how they handle the money and whatever's left to take care of these younger children. These probate records are going to validate the will. That's basically what probate's all about, right? This is what he wanted. This is how it gets taken care of. These are original documents, so if you are doing any kind of paper, for example, where you have to have a balance of original documents versus secondary sources, this is a great place to go. They will go through, and there are certain steps that they have to do when they go through probate. You have to take an inventory of a dead person's property. So when you're talking about a skillet, you're also talking about an axe or any kind of farm implements or any kind of feather beds or any kind of chairs or chains or anything that they would have used in their daily life. You can get a snapshot of what that person's life was about just by looking at these inventories. Appraisal of property. How valuable was it? And sometimes you even get to see, so they have a big old garage sale after somebody's dead, and people come in and they buy all that stuff. Not any different than what we do today, except somebody's actually keeping a record of who's buying that stuff. I love that too, because you get to see who's in that community and who's coming back to get that, right? You also see all the decisions handling the property and the final settlement of the estate. So all of these are in the probate records, and I cannot stress how much of a goldmine this is. This is the best part of doing any kind of genealogical research, apart from finding out that you're related to different people, right? So I have to go back to Oliver Loving, and I understand we have people in here related to Oliver Loving, which just tickles me no end. I am writing a book about Oliver Loving. I've been writing a book about Oliver Loving for years, it seems. And I keep finding more about him, so I'm not quite done yet. But because of his last name, I'm always on the lookout, as I'm sure you are as genealogists. You're always looking for people with a name you recognize. So here I am, and this is his last will. And you can't read most of it, but this is the part that gets me. I leave my wife, Susan D. Loving, and my son, this should be James C. Loving, the executor of this will. So he's left his wife and his son in charge of his will without bond to probate court or any other court. So what does this mean? Am I going to find probate records on him? Not one. Am I hopeful I still will? Absolutely, right? So here I am in Jack County, and here I am going through the records because I'm going through every record everywhere I can, and here's Oliver Loving. Well, Oliver Loving's grandson lived in Jack County, and guess what his name was? Oliver Loving. This is not my dude, right? But I am hopeful, and I have gone through every one of these pages just in case this is what I want. But it's not. There is no probate record for Oliver Loving. But while I'm doing my research, as Tom pointed out, I'm a data nut. These are property tax records from different counties that I collect, and you can see down here at the bottom I go through systematically, and from the creation of that county until 1865, which is when slavery legally ended in Texas, I go through and I document all the different slave owners and what kind of property they have, because I want to build a story upon that, right? And so one of the times I go through there, I highlight who I think I might need to go back and look at later on. And then I highlight in pink anybody that's a woman, obviously a woman, because as a woman, I want to try to make sure that we don't miss out on the women's history in this story. And at one specific time, I transcribed a document, and here I have Martha Loving. So I'm very excited, right? Loving. How many Lovings could there be in North Texas, for goodness sakes? Surely she's related to my guy, one way or the other, right? So I'm going to go in and I'm going to look for her. So first thing, as most of you probably will do, is you're going to go to the census records, right? And you're going to try to find your person. So I go and I find Martha Loving, and I'm looking and I'm thinking, is that really Loving? I don't know. Is it? I'm not really sure. But she's married to a John, and this is from Fannin County, so Fannin County's right here. And they will move in 1856-ish to Cook County, which is here. It's not actually formed on this map yet from 1845. But I'm kind of getting a feel for her, right? So she's from Arkansas. He's from Kentucky. He's got himself listed as a farmer with $2,000 worth of goods. So I'm going to go track him down. Also not listed on this page is one of her other sons is Thaddeus. He's not listed here, but he'll come back into the story in a minute. So here's John Loring. And if you don't know about property taxes, you should know about property taxes. Property taxes are recorded every year. Census records are recorded every 10 years. Yes? Think about the last 10-year stretch. How much has happened in 10 years? How much is not recorded on a census document? A lot, right? A lot of people go through history and they document every 10 years and they think they're getting a really good snapshot of a person's life. I would argue they're not getting diddly, right? They're getting a snapshot every 10 years. That's really all they're getting. They're getting to look at perhaps how many children they had, where they were born, where they were from, and how their wealth has grown or shrank. I want you to think about what your wealth was 10 years ago and compare it to now, and all the different reasons that might have had an impact on that, right? Including COVID, that's not recorded in the census anywhere, right? Tax records are recorded every year, because like it or not, they're coming for you every January. Yep, every January 31st, you've got to pony up. Well, they used to take property taxes, and again, you would assess them from the beginning of the year, and then by June, you had to make sure you had paid your taxes. And they're going to record every year what you own and how your property builds. This is 1856. This is Fannin County, which is is it one or two counties over from here? Fannin County taxes. This is John Loring. It becomes clear to me at this point, I'm not even tracking the right family, right? This is Loring. Why am I even here? But I am now, so I'm going to stay with it. And this is his land. So these are different plots of acreage. So I can't read that one. I think that's 280 and then 160, 320. So all these different plots of land that he's got. He's doing pretty well for himself. And then these are the creeks that they would be on. And right here, this is the enslaved column. So how many enslaved people he owns. Right here, he's got 9 and their value. 15 horses, the value. And I can't remember if that's 20 or 30 head of cattle and the value of that. So this is 1856. They pick up and they leave at this point. And they then go to Cook County. And when I go to Cook County in 1857, John's not anywhere to be found. He's just gone. But here's Martha. And Martha is now listed as the administratrix of, she is an administrator at this point, right? So this property she's listing may or may not be hers, but it's probably hers, and she's also serving as administrator. See this land she's got? 1,304 acres. This is where it's located. 9 enslaved people, just like John, right? 14 horses, $700. 700 head of cattle? Where did that come from? Did John leave her pretty sweet? Or is this John's property at all? In the Fannin County records, he didn't have any of that. And how do we even find out? Where are we going to look? We're going to try and find out what happened to John, right? He's obviously missing. So what happened to John is an administrator. He's gone, so he's probably dead. And what's going to happen to Martha with her property? So here we are back to my property records, right? Here she is as Martha Loring. This is 1856. And she drops completely out of the records at this point. Look, here she is. Next year, she's completely gone. Down here, she's listed as Martha Moore. So I just missed a step because I'm not really sure what I did. But yes, John Loring had died. She had shown up in the property tax records by herself right here. And she stays a widow woman until 1862, right? And then in 1862, she remarries. And we will see right here, Isaac Moore, Martha Loring, and she gets married, and we can see these in the Cook County marriage records. So I'm jumping all over the place, but there's a reason. So what has happened? I want to know what's going on with Martha. Why is she not a Martha Loving anymore, or Loring, or whatever her last name is? Where has this Moore person come from, and what in the world has happened to John? So I get to looking, and I'm looking in every single record we can find. I want to look in the Marks and Brands. This, of course, is cattle. Civil records. There's a rumor going around that somewhere along the line, John actually was murdered. Murdered by one of his enslaved people when he came back drunk from horse racing. And apparently a wayward axe gets stuck in John's skull. And I want to know the details because this is good, right? Can't find records anywhere. Nothing. So right now it's just a story. I like it, but I can't quote it as fact. So I'm going to try and find out what's happened. I'm going to try and track John down and find out what's going on because I want to find out if he's got a will or not. So I go and look, and every county clerk's office has an index. And in that index, just like you find with the wills, you have an index for probates. Okay? Probates are going to be in those little envelopes. This is the envelope that the probate is going to be in. This right here, you can see Martha Loring is in charge. She's the she's the executor, and this is the estate of John Loring, right? And if you look at it, it's still not completely clear if it's an R or V. This is when it was filed, 1862, and it is right here in box number 10, okay? This is how we locate it. So we're going to go in and we're going to look. And in this little gold mine are all kinds of pieces of paper that tell us about John Loring, including this one. Martha Loring paid the sum of $20 for attendance on John Loring during his last illness, and this is the doctor. So he was sick with something, right? So we need to find out. We've got a date on there. And then we find out that he has indeed had an appraisal of his property, and here's the appraisal of his property. So he has enslaved people. And here they are, they're listed, 1, 2, 3, 4. How many did he have on his tax records? 9. 5 of those weren't his. Okay, joint property. Here are the mules. So he's got 3, 2, and then he's got all these other ones. Do we have any horses? Yes, we do, right down here. 20 head of hogs. We have a mare, an old mare, and a Spanish mare. We have these mules. So remember, he had like 15 horses listed. Cattle, 90 head of cattle. 7 yoke of oxen, 18 head of 4-year-olds, and 9 3-year-olds. That is not 700, no matter how many times you want to add that up, right? This is closer to what he declared, but even that is just a little bit over what he declared and paid taxes on, but I'm not going to judge anybody. Debts owned. This is part of the estate, so right here, C.C. Alexander, who's actually in Fannin County, you can see that he went right before he died, and they bought some stuff, including calico, right? So somebody's making some dresses or something, probably the enslaved people. You've got different kinds of material goods right here. He also takes out a note, so he borrowed $63. So the story that he went to the horse races is possible. He borrowed some money before he went. And then he died on the way back. You can see if these debts have been paid, and certainly they were paid. Martha paid them later. This is in the probate records, so you can see where he's been and whether those debts were paid. Where's Martha spending her money? What does she value? Or what did he value? What did he tell her that he needed to be done, that he needed taken care of? Well, right here, this is education. So he's paying, or she is paying, Lem Gooding. This is the English grammar books, shoe threads. So apparently they need to take care of their shoes, but arithmetic books, soda, not Coca-Cola, just a different kind of soda, right? Here we go, different tuition again. So they're educating the kids that she is now in charge of taking care of, right? These are her children, but she still has to do as he said. You can also see in this probate record, this is the amount of money she's got coming in. So 1858, she's got $40 coming in from Mr. Dillingham. She has got $20 coming in from Alan Gilliam. She's got from Mr. Holmes $155. Now this may not seem like a lot of money, But a Civil War guy, when he signs up, he's getting paid $12 a month to go fight. Average wages at this time for skilled labor is $300 a year. Put this into perspective. How's Martha doing? She's doing really well. She's kicking butt and taking names, right? She's taking this money in, and it's all been recorded for the court. This is what she is doing in accounts. So we not only see what happened with him, we also see what she's doing. Incidentally, at this time, there are no banks in Texas. She's a money lender. Where's she getting that money? It's just a probate records, but now you're going down a track of where she's getting this money. And if you think back to that cattle that she had, she's selling and buying cattle, and you can actually see right here where she buys 300 head of cattle with some of the money that she's making, loaning money. So she's moving that money around just like we would do today, investing, buying, selling, loaning. Right here, this is her total for the specific year. If you enter that and you try to see what it is adjusted for income, for inflation, she's making $87,000 or $84,743, and this is during the Civil War. Remember what they say about people during the Civil War? They're not really making any money out here. I beg to differ, and I'll give you this probate record as my proof. Yes. She's also spending quite well, too. So she's like number one in the community. We're going to see her coming in and I'm like, yes, Miss Loring, absolutely. $73,000 or $79,000 that she's spending during the Civil War. She's still coming out ahead, and she's way ahead compared to the average skilled laborer. She's living pretty high on the hog. Now, one of her sons is Thaddeus, and this is not in the probate records, but when you know who belongs to the families, you're going to keep digging. I'm sure everybody in here knows how that is. Thaddeus is going to sign up to the Civil War, and he's going to get sent to Arkansas, and when he does get sent to Arkansas, he contracts the measles, which is how most people will die in Arkansas during the Civil War. And Thaddeus is going to be one of those people. So she's not only dealing with the will and the estate of her first husband, she's now dealing with the death of her second. This is about the time she remarries, and she marries Isaac Moore, right? When she remarries Isaac Moore, she's not the 5th largest slave owner and the 6th or 7th largest livestock owner in Cook County. She's a good catch. She's doing just fine for herself. So Martha shows up in 1869, where she'd been missing before. These are back to the property tax records, and she shows back up. But this time, she's listed as Martha A. Martha. What is this with this last name? What's going on here? What is it with women's last names? What makes it hard to track the women? Men, have you ever had more than one last name? Anybody in here, raise your hand if you've had more than one last name as a man. Women? More than one last name, more than 2 last names? Maybe we're telling more than we should on ourselves. But that makes our history hard to track, right? And it makes it even harder when somebody at the tax records transcribes your name as Martha A. Martha when it should not be Martha A. Martha. But the fact that she shows back up in the tax records when she hadn't been declaring as a married woman makes me wonder what's going on. So you're going to go look. And I'm going right back to the probate records. Here's your index, right? And I'm looking to find out what happened to her husband. And there it is, I.A. Moore, and here's Martha A. Moore listed as the executor of her will. So here it is, box number 20, or drawer number 22, box number 22. Yeah, here it is in the wall. You pull it out, real long box. It's got all kinds of documents in it. And right here, it's listed 22. So you can track each one back. Here she is, Martha A. Moore, listed once again as the executive on a deed record or on a probate record, and now she's looking at the estate of Isaac. So she's still dealing with her first husband's estate. Now she's dealing with the death of her son, and now she's dealing with her second husband. It's actually her third, but we won't talk about that. So I know it's complicated. here we go, 1872. Is that when he died? She showed in the records in 1869. What is all this? What are all these about? So I'm going to go in and I'm going to look. And thankfully, we have another probate file to go through. But look, what's missing? This is when he died, the whatever day of whatever month, 1868. Well, that wasn't very much of a help, was it? But we know he's dead. That's no doubt about it. She apparently didn't even know when he died, which I'm not really sure what that says about poor Martha. But they're going to go through and they're going to do the inventory. And sometimes you'll find that county clerks and people who work for them can't write any better than you can. And this is one of those examples where you start looking. But right here, cattle, is that 200 head of cattle belong to the two of them, right? You go through and you look at the records. And then you go through, and here's another one. So community property after Moore died was 200 head of cattle. So here you go. Here it is, 200 head of cattle. And all the other things that she's got that were theirs together. Let's go back into the property tax record. So here she is again, Martha A. Moore, 5 enslaved people. Can y'all see that? It's kind of blurred. How many head of cattle does she have? 1,000. 200 are theirs. How much is hers? 800 head. She's doing all right for herself, isn't she? This little old woman out there on the frontier. And sure enough, if you look through the census records, because this is how it went, 1850, women were not asked what they did for a living. So it's not the fact that people thought they weren't doing anything. If you were male over 15, your occupation was recorded. If you were a woman over 15, it didn't matter. We didn't care. Right. 1860, by that time they're like, oh, we need to be recording what these women are doing. Right here, Martha is listed as a single woman because, of course, we know John has died by this point, and she's listed right here as a farmer. Yep, from Arkansas. That's her wealth, which is a ton of money. 1880, she's listed here as Martha A. Moore. And she's finally listed as has stock. So all the way through all these records and these census records that you would be checking every 10 years, do we ever have any record of her being a stock raiser? Not until 1880, right? So you've missed out on all of that. And you don't even know to look for Martha Moore because you're not going to think to look for her if you hadn't gone through all these other records. So I have no idea what this is. Martha Moore. This is where she's going through those records. Oh, these are some of the records that are in Moore's property, or his last, in his, you're going to have to edit this part out of the YouTube video. This is where she goes through, and this is part of her probate records. And so this is Martha solemnly swearing that that all of these debts have been paid off, right? She's done exactly what she was supposed to do as executor of the estate. One of the documents that I found in here, which I thought was kind of fun, was purchases of 2 cans of pineapples, and it's $2, right? So it's $1 a can. I don't know if y'all look at the price of vegetables per can anymore, but I'm struggling with paying more than $1 for a can of vegetables because I don't want to pay that. Back here in 1868, she's paying $2 for a can of pineapples. She's living good, isn't she? And pineapples and cans, who would have thought? But anyway, yeah, just some of the things. So you can find out some of the things that are happening on the frontier. What are they buying? What are they selling? You know, the fabric alone, the vegetables they're buying, where they're selling. And you can always go in and do research on these places where they're purchasing. Add more to your story than just the original records. And so you go through and you look at all these different documents, including this one, which is, again, the repeat of the same thing, that she's paid all these debts. She's done exactly what she needed to do. So Martha is buried, listed as wife of John Loring. You can barely see her name right here. Of course, who puts the tombstones up? The kids put them up, right? So I'm going off this thinking that her and Moore probably never had any kids, and the kids came along from her and the union of John Loring, and they've put this headstone up. But if you're looking at this and you're looking at census records, and this is all you're looking for, do you know anything about Isaac Moore? Do you know anything about their life if you didn't look at the will and you didn't look at the probate records? You don't know anything. It's just numbers. It's just names. You got to look for those documents. You got to find what you're looking for, right? So wills and probates are going to recreate that missing history. This is the good stuff, really, really, really. You can find out about the community. You can find out about what they're buying, what they're selling, where they're going, who they're visiting, back and forth, Fannin County, and then they go through Collin County, and they go up to Arkansas. All this is documented in those probate records. You can find the women. How often do you really hear about the women at this time period? And I stressed a lot about the women in this talk for a reason. Usually we talk about people during this time period, and we talk about the men and all the things the men do. And I'm not trying to discredit the men's actions whatsoever during this time. But I do want to talk about the fact that the women are here and that we can find those in those records, right? This is one of the places that we can find them. Same setup, every courthouse. You're going to go in, you're going to go to the county clerk's office, you're going to go look in the deed records for the wills, you're going to go straight to the probate records to look for the probates, 2 different places. They're generally not going to be, you're not going to see one in the same place as the other because they're 2 different parts of the court's responsibilities, so they're going to keep them in separate places. So even if you do find the wills, make sure you go and look for the probates, right? It's helpful if you know who died and when, because when you get into the index records, you don't always see those dates on there, and so you're going to miss them. So if you can, before you go into those courthouses, always have a list of names to look for. Right, that really helps you. And again, don't forget to look at those property tax records, and those are all online at Family Search. So LDS, the church, Mormons came through, documented all that. It's all available online, and it's all free. Go in and look through your county and try and find your people. And as I said, it adds to the background, right? This is what you want. We're not just names and numbers on a piece of paper. We are people, and we all do things, and I want to know what that's all about, and that's what you're going to find in these records. So questions. This is the question period of the program.
Let me bring the microphone to you.
Say that one more time.
Questions, comments, protest. I'll bring the microphone to you, and this is a library. You can say what you want. I'm going to ask the first question. I know in my own research, it was interesting to see in wills particularly how one person would say, I'm not giving this person a dime because they stole from my Uncle Jed or something like that. Did you find much of that?
Sure. That's the good stuff.
Anyways, I'm saying that to entice you to read those wills.
So you go up and down the courthouse, or I do. I travel from the Red down to the Rio, right? I study the counties primarily between, just in your mind, Fort Worth to Graham, Texas, right? So it's about the 98th to the 100th, but they weren't extended that far. And as you go down the frontier, you go up and down what I call the frontier. It's not necessarily the frontier anymore, of course, because we now have that whole area we call West Texas that everybody tries to stay away from. You see in all these different records the differences in the property that they hand down to different generations. Specifically livestock, because that is the cattle frontier, right? We have a tendency to think of different counties producing different material that they're going to sell. When you look in the lower southern counties in Texas, you're going to see a lot of crops because that weather in that land is obviously better for growing cotton and bigger crops. Up here, we're dealing with cattle, and we're dealing with crops like oats or wheat, and definitely corn. Corn is the number one crop of the South. And so the amount of land that it takes to make a living is going to vary. The amount of money that you're going to invest in different amount of land and the amount of money you're going to invest in help is going to be different, right? And so up and down the frontier, up and down and throughout all these different counties, you'll see different amounts of property or different kinds of property that you will hand down to different people. Including tools that you need to work the land. Are you working it or is somebody else working it? Are you, in later years, are you renting that out to somebody else on shares, or how are you doing it? And you will see that in the probate records. You will definitely see them in wills, and they all vary. And yes, you do see Uncle Joe doesn't get anything.
And why?
Or Uncle Joe already got it, right? Or in cases, sometimes I was looking at one today, and it was about willing slaves, and so the value placed on different slaves was calculated, and when it came down to dividing it evenly, one of the brothers had to pay another brother money to even out what he was getting in the will, and that's not a whole lot different than what we see today, right? Well, so and so gets this, but you need to give him just a little bit extra to make it even, and it was the same thing back then.
Did you find that the value of the slaves was different according to the gender?
Gender, age, and location. Obviously, a woman is going to be more valuable when she's of a childbearing age. So when you see women, young women 15 to 30, sometimes up to 40, their price is significantly higher. You'll see more women sold when they're 16 to 23 than any specific age, and it's not unusual for them to come with a child or for the child that they had to be sold separately. Men hold their value usually from the age of about 16 to their 40s, right? Because a man can still physically labor just as hard. Not that women can't, but you have to keep the childbearing in mind as far as the value goes. But men will, their value starts to dip once they reach to 40. Children, 6 months up, you can see them being sold separately, and it varies, $200 on up. Keep in mind, just for perspective, an acre of land is $1 to, depends where you live. It goes up in value and goes down in value depending on whether it's improved or not. A hog, as I said, is $2. A sheep is $2. Of course, a sheep, you're not only looking at the meat value, but you're also looking at the wool, right? Which is just keeps going and going as long as you want to share it. Horse is $75 to $150. A cow is $6 to $8. And an enslaved person is going to vary $200 to, I found one for $3,500. So the value is in enslaved property, absolutely, positively.
My grandparents had a ranch.
Uh-huh.
I can just tell you, 50 to 60 cows is a lot to
It's a
take care
lot
of.
to handle.
And when you were talking 700, I said, my soul.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're not like dogs, and
No,
you
no.
can pick them up and carry them to the vet.
You're not picking them up at all.
That's a lot of cows.
Barely when they're born. And of course, the number of livestock you own, and we found this out 2 years ago when the drought came through, we had some cows. I thought, well, we've got a little bit of land. Let's try and raise some cows. And when I say some cows, we started with 3. Don't get any big ideas. And then they multiplied as cows do. And here we are, 6 cows, and we couldn't water them. There was not enough water, right? 1 cow, 6 gallons a day, where you're going to keep filling that pot, right? And of course, if there's not any water, is there any grass? And if you're selling livestock, you're selling grass. That's what you're selling, right? And it's the same all the way through time. We're going to go through these drought cycles and cycles of plenty, and for whatever reason, and that's going to definitely affect what your property is. Yeah, you're going to either get rid of them or you're not. And another thing that we also don't even think about is what happens when you get older? What do you do with all that property you've got? You downsize. Does that mean you're getting poorer, or does that mean you're just getting smarter? Right? You're not going to take care of as much of that property. So when you're looking at somebody's property after they're dead or as they get older, don't for a minute think they're getting poorer. They're getting rid of a lot of that stuff a lot of the times, right? They're downsizing. They're giving it to their kids. They're selling it, and they're using that money to live without having to work. And so when you get down to the fact that you have this will or this probated will, don't always look at the value of what they have at that specific moment. Backtrack just a little bit Did they get rid of it? Did they sell it? What did they do throughout those years leading up to that point?
Questions, comments, protests?
No protests.
Hold on just a second.
I protest about your comment about West Texas.
I'm sorry.
That's where I grew up.
Is it really? I just
And
got
my
back from
parents-
Lubbock the other day, and that's a
Oh.
long, long drive.
Around Odessa.
Yeah, that's a long drive too. And if y'all haven't been out there, the Haley Library is a really great research center. Right? It's just a little museum down there. Highly, highly, highly recommended. It's great.
So I noticed in several of the probate records where the sons and son-in-laws bought the property that was being sold.
Mm-hmm.
And so it didn't get given to them. They had to purchase it.
You'll see that a lot. And it took my mind a little bit of time to wrap around that. You'll also see that in bills of sale. A lot of people will say, out of love and affection, I'm giving you this, but you also owe me like $800 in the process. I'm thinking, that's not very loving. That's not how I transcribe that. And you'll see that also in wills, right? They'll get this. Also, you'll see the value of certain property that they're giving, which is kind of handy because then you can transcribe it to the time that you're looking at and you can put it into perspective, just like right now. If somebody pulls up in a really expensive car, you're thinking, oh, they're doing pretty good. John Loring was involved in racing horses, and some of the horses he actually had were valued higher than the $7,550 range, right? And so you can kind of put that in your story when you're telling about your relatives or whoever you're researching. They were obviously more invested in that than any other thing. And it turns out John Loring also consulted with other racehorse owners around the country, because once you find out what he's doing, you're going to keep looking for more information about that, right? And again, you're not going to know that if you don't go in those probate records.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for the wonderful program and all the excellent information tonight. And you're so so right about doing the women. And I just want to share too, my ancestors go pretty far back in Collin County. And when my third great grandfather died, I kept searching all the Collin County records for wills or probates. Found nothing, but the only thing they had was a community property estate that the widow filed showing the property they owned, and the adult children signed it, and there was no guardianship records because she still had minor children, 2 of them, and there was 2 witnesses. At that time, I knew the names, but I didn't know how they were related. It was her brother-in-law and her nephew-in-law, and so they did not have to file a probate record for the property he owned. And there's more to that story, but it's longer than what we have tonight. And the other thing is, so when he died, later on, I just thought, I've missed it. But I kept finding it. And then later on, there were guardianship records in the Collin County records for the 2 minor children. But it wasn't for the third great grandfather. It was for his father, who died in 1885 in Randolph County, Georgia. And nobody even knew who the father was. So that led me further down the trail. And you want to look for the women, and you want to see if they remarried, wonder why they didn't marry. And that woman that filed, my third great grandmother that filed the community property estate, one of our West Texas members, he's related to that family through one of her nephews or nieces on the Hall side. Her maiden name was Hall. He found a guy that had, somebody had bought her brother's house in Georgia. The woman was demolishing it, and there were letters in the wall from my third great grandmother and her son to his cousins and her to her nieces and nephews in Georgia. So
That's a good story.
thank you so much.
So I want to build on that.
Thanks for sharing that.
One of the things that we kick ourselves for is not being able to find records in specific counties. And one of the things I have learned going county courthouse to county courthouse is that you're not always going to find it in that county. It's not unusual to find, say, a Collin County record filed in Tarrant County and then probated in Palapena County, or all. It's a wild goose chase. And until and if all these records ever get digitized, it's going to take legwork. We're going to have to keep going county to courthouse to county courthouse, which personally is kind of fun because you get to eat at the pie shops on the courthouse squares and find out all these things, right? I also highly recommend going to the places because there's no substitute for going and standing where those people stood, right? Yes, things have changed. Yes, the trees are taller. Yes, the buildings are different. But you still get a feel for the place. And I'll give you a perfect example, and that's with Olive 11. I was asked to do a dedication ceremony when they did a state marker in Kentucky, Muhlenberg County, Kentucky. I knew nothing about Muhlenberg County. Anybody in here know who John Prine was?
Sure.
John Prine was the singer, right? And
Right.
he had a song that used to be about Muhlenberg County. Well, Muhlenberg County used to be one of the largest coal producers in the South. And so for me, Olive 11 was always the cattle guy, right? He was the one that helped blaze this trail, according to the narrative, which is also wrong, but that's a different story. So I couldn't figure out why you would leave Kentucky. Bluegrass, Kentucky, the horses, the mules, the everything else. So we drove up there, had my mother with me. We drove up there, and I'm looking around, and there's not one fence anywhere. And not only is there not one fence, there's no livestock anywhere. Why is there no livestock here in Kentucky? Because that makes no sense to me. Well, it turns out there's not enough lime in the grass to feed the grass where the coal was being mined. And if there's not grass, you're not going to have any livestock, right? So Olive 11 basically could have gotten involved in surveying land like his daddy did, or he could have gotten involved in the coal mining. What did he do? He moved to Texas where he got involved in livestock and merchandising. Two different options. I would not have known that. It would never have crossed my mind, not even flittered across there, if I hadn't have gone up there and noticed there were no cows up there in that field. And you're not going to do that if you don't go. So go to the courthouses if you're able. Go walk around. Go visit the pie shops. There's never a bad pie shop everywhere, right? Go look in there and go in the courthouses and find what you're looking for. I will also stress that sometimes the people who work in the courthouses aren't the most helpful. And I don't want to say bad things about, because I spend a lot of time in county courthouses and I don't want anybody to know I'm coming. But if you know the records are there, if you have a good idea that they're there, just make your case. Right? Always be polite, but make your case, and you'll find them. Sometimes it takes longer than what you want. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 visits if you can, but you'll find the records. You just have to really be persistent.
I have found that when you go to the county courthouse, particularly if it's a rural courthouse, if the person there knows some distant cousin of yours, all of a sudden they get up out of their chair and go find it.
Whole different experience.
So, yes, there's a personal touch there.
Absolutely.
Particularly in the rural ones.
Yeah, and it also depends what time period you're researching, right? Are you researching back in the 20s or the 30s? Because there's a good chance somebody there knows somebody that was alive in the 20s or 30s. I'm researching the 1845 to 1865 time period. Nobody's alive. Nobody knows anything. Yes, sir, you have a question down here?
Let me bring you the mic, please.
So I'm not sure if this would be in a courthouse or not. My grandparents divorced in the 36.
District court.
Yeah, well, it was on the docket for over a year. It was in the newspaper periodically, monthly at least, divorce. And then it was taken off the docket. Now, the story I'd heard is my grandfather found, I guess, an ad in the paper for a Mexican divorce. And then I found out after reading that that's something that's real. I guess, I don't know if it's a lawyer or what, but takes care of that and files it in, I don't know what they're called. I won't call them counties, but in Mexico.
Okay.
And then that can take place. He married a year later, but I've found no other records. So I'm thinking that there's some credence to that story, but would some record of that been kept?
It might have been, divorces are in district court. So marriages are in county courts, are in the county clerk's office. Divorces are in the district clerk's office. Because, we want to keep you looking around everywhere.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's better to look, if they were remarried afterwards, look for another wedding or a marriage license and see if that can verify
Yeah.
that they actually
he
were divorced.
remarried. So yeah, that would be probably a good idea. Yeah, I didn't think of
But I've never heard of that, and now I'm going to have to go home and look for that.
that. Well, this was in upstate New York, so.
Also, when you go back to the guardianship records, those are also in district court. So they're going to be spread out. Again, county court versus district court. You're going to have different records.
So I'm curious if you want to trace land, if you know they lived on land like 1870s, and you're saying look at property tax records, because that would show. I have, this is my husband's family, are Holloways in Erath County.
Okay.
You're probably familiar with them.
Uh-huh.
And do they, sometimes they were in trouble with the law, so do they just walk away from the land? If you're trying to trace how it,
Always go
How it-
backwards.
okay.
Always
If you
work
start
backwards.
with today and who owns it today, and you look at property tax, at some point, will you be able to see?
So property tax records, just like census records, have a time gap on them. So Texas 1910 is where you're going to basically see those property taxes. So anything before that, you're not necessarily going to see it because they don't want to chance it that anybody's still alive. Okay. Census records, I think we're now up to the 1950s that are online. So that helps a lot. But anytime you do land searches, work backwards because it says who it came from. And then it'll just track it backwards, right? So always work your way backwards. Just like census records, you should really work backwards with census records if you possibly can. Property tax records, if you know when they came to Erath County, start with a date you definitely know.
Well, their name is on the land, even on the property records today.
On the property, right? And so that'll, a lot of, the property records will change after the surveys. You've also got survey records that you'll see in a lot of the survey record in the offices themselves. But they also have land plat documents that you'll see in the county courthouses, and you can see those. They'll also show in the tax records what creek they're on, if they're on a creek, if they're not on a creek. And there's also the government land office. Have you started there? So the government land office will track some of that, and you can look those names up. I'm actually taking students on Friday to Austin to go to the government land office because we've been transcribing documents from there. But you'll find records for that land there. You're welcome. I really would like to hear more about that story.
Two little comments I was going to make. Spelling errors. My ancestors didn't know how to spell their names.
A lot of people didn't know how to spell. And it wasn't just your ancestors that didn't know how to spell their names. The county clerks didn't know how to spell, right? So we have sound X, we have phonetic spelling, we have all kinds of spellings all over the place.
I know here in Allen, we had 3 people who were brothers, and each one of them spelled their name differently.
Maybe they didn't like each other.
Around here in Collin County and around here, you could sustain about 1 cow per acre, 125 cows. The rule was 125 cows for 100 acres.
Yep.
When I heard 700 cows, I'm thinking, and as you go west, that number, the ratio drops.
Yes.
And so I'm thinking she had several thousand acres.
She didn't have to have any land. It was open range.
Oh, that was it. Okay.
Changes everything. Now, that said, cattle owners will own more land than they need to own, and a lot of that is speculation. They have extra money from disposing of livestock, so they buy up the land. They're speculating because somebody else is going to come in when that land becomes no good for cattle, because after a while they will eat that land down. And the cotton raisers or the crop people will move in, but they will hold on to that land. But a lot of the times, especially in the time of luring, barbed wire doesn't really hit Texas till 74. Glidden will patent barbed wire in 74, and then we'll see the windmills come in, of course, once you start fencing off that land. But it's open range. That doesn't mean that they don't have fences. That doesn't mean that they're not strategically breeding. A lot of the fences are bodark, so they take those bodark seeds and they make their own fences, or they also do the crisscross, the cedar ties, and they do that. Or they string something up. Not barbed wire, obviously, but they do make their own fences. But they're not enclosing 700 head of cattle. It's open range, and you'll see in the documents, the bills of sale, a lot of people say, 350 head or more or less are grazing on the west banks of the Medina River. Right? All you have to do is go gather them up. They've got this and this brand. That means they're mine. They kind of know where they are. They kind of don't know where they are. And they're mixing and matching with other people's cattle somewhere out there, which is why the branding is so important, which is why you see the branding wars going on later on, because, people are going in and changing them, or they're going in when they come back from the war and just branding however they want.
Interesting observation. One question in the back, there was somebody. Hold on, let me bring you the mic.
So what class do you teach?
I teach Texas history, but then I teach research methods, basically. So, for example, this semester, my class is transcribing documents from the General Land Office. So we transcribed land records that were re-gifted in the 1880s, and they were gifted to people who had fought in the Texas Revolution. And it was decided by the state that these people were now poor and destitute, and they needed more land so that they could sell it. Most of that land is actually the county that, I can't remember what it's called now, the one that used to belong to Texas, but then was given to Oklahoma. Anyway.
Duval,
Yes,
Greer
no.
County.
Yeah, so it was given, that's where most of that land was, and they sold it, and then basically one big cattle operation buys it out. So we transcribed those, and we're transcribing letters from Sam Houston in 1861, and then we transcribed immigration records from Thurber, Texas. We transcribed some documents from a tanning place. They were not like a tanning saloon, a tanning like leather. I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't have any leather on. And the descriptions of that, and then something else, and I can't remember what it was. But they're going over their cursive skills, right? They're ramping those up. They're learning how to data mine and how to collect information from primary source documents. And they're making connections with different archives, because a lot of these people want to go into history and do that. But last semester, we researched a black cemetery in Stephenville that was founded in 1922, when it was decided there needs to be more space for white residents. And so they dug those remains up, and they moved them across town, and they established a black cemetery over there. And so they researched that cemetery and the people that were buried in there. And it just depends, whatever. I want to teach them how to research and how to think. I don't want to tell them how to think. That's why you go to college. That's why you attend lectures, right? To learn how to think. And so that's what we do.
Aren't those students blessed to have Dr. Lyles as a professor?
Well, I don't know if they're blessed. We don't take tests in my class, so I think they really like that too.
One last comment, question, protest. Anybody? This is your
There,
chance to ask. Here you go, right here.
I'm just wondering if are you using AI in a lot of your research?
We don't AI.
No.
No.
Good for you.
We don't AI. It's one of the problems we have in the history department is that a lot of students like to use AI to answer questions. And so we're always trying to come up with assignments that requires no AI whatsoever, because we are there to teach, not police, right? We want to make sure that you're doing your own work. And so you'll see AI used in different other departments, and we just don't understand it. Why would you do that, right? I want my students to think, even if they're not thinking the same way I'm thinking, that's okay. Just show me why you're thinking that, and we'll go from there. So that's how we kind of do it.
There was a lady down here.
There's one in the back.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom. I just was going to say, add too, about finding the women and so forth. If you can't, because we didn't have death certificates way back. when,
1903.
Is look on those, like she was speaking about, look on the tax records or the deeds. They've been microfilmed and on Family Search, and if you've got Collin County or any of the counties in Texas or outside of Texas, look and see when that man, it goes year by year, just like she said, you go and look and see where that man drops off, and you may see a state of, or you may see the wife, like she mentioned, and that will narrow it down, and then you can know what year to narrow down to go to the books and look for a probate record.
A lot of the women will have agents reporting for them because they don't actually show up to report their own taxes, but somebody else, maybe in the family, will do that. Collin County's records are also online from the county tax record or from the county clerk's office. I found this out today because that's where I spent all morning. If you go on the county clerk's website and you go through and you look for documents, do the deed search, on the very top corner, you've got an other document option, and it's just other, is all it says. It doesn't promise anything. But if you click on it, it's actually the historic records, which historic apparently is before 1900. And so you can find those. It's not hard to find, but the thing I don't like about it is that they don't have the index on there. So you'll have to go document to document to document to document. If you have more time, run up to the county clerk's office and go through the index books and look for your people, and then you can go home and do the rest of that research at home.
Now I'm going to ask the audience a question. What fun story did you find in your genealogical research that you never heard growing up from anybody? Okay, in the back. She looks emphatic.
I'm going to sit down.
So I couldn't find a death certificate for one of my great-grandfathers, and he lived in Delta County in Cupper. And so my mom and I went to the courthouse there, and I asked if there were any probate records. And the probate record we got was a 6-man jury trial, and they declared him insane and sentenced him to Terrell, Texas, to the state hospital there. But between the date of the trial and 2 weeks later, when he was supposed to be transported, he committed suicide. So there's no death certificate, there's nothing in the newspaper, and my mom had never heard that either. So we think he had Huntington's disease because he had 2 uncles apparently that had the same problem. And one of his uncles, we found a newspaper article for that said he had thrown 2 of his daughters down a well and jumped in after them. And his daughters died, and he was still alive that night when they fished him out. And I thought, he'd be dead if it was me there, but so not everyone in probate is dead.
Absolutely. The state records are also online. So for the Huntsville and Terrell, I think, used to have records online. Abilene didn't. Abilene was an epilepsy. If you had epilepsy, you were sent to Abilene. Terrell, so Russ County, and then Huntsville, a lot of those records are online, and how they were treated and all the different steps they took them through, those are available to research.
One last question. Okay, here we go. Okay.
That was a fund I had that I hadn't heard growing up is most of my family stayed in upstate New York and Connecticut, but part of the family traveled out west all the way to Oregon So, and these are diaries from various travelers. So it's a very interesting read.
Those are great resources.
Just to follow up, there are people who travel those trails. I mean, that's all they do is make sure they traveled each one from, some of them went to Oregon, some went to Salt Lake City, some went to, and when I say travel, they go by bicycle and things like that. We're not talking about cars. And I thought, everybody has their own hobby.
Distances, we think of distances as prohibitive, but we have a tendency to think that with a car, whereas a lot of people didn't think that when they just had a horse. And you see people traveling enormous distances and walking enormous distances that we would never even consider today. Of course, they were a lot fitter, I think, back then. One of the areas I study is the impact of the California gold rush on Texas, and it's something we don't have a tendency to think about. But for me, as a historian of the livestock trade, before the gold rush, you see so much livestock there that they're skinning them. Basically, that's what they're doing. They're skinning them. They're leaving the carcasses there. They're not doing much with the meat because, of course, they didn't have refrigeration. And then they're shipping those hides away, right? When you get 100,000 people descend into one area, what are they going to do with that cattle? Are they going to just let it sit right there and rot? Heck no, they're going to eat it. They're going to work it to death. And so what are they going to need? They're going to need more. And we have that here in Texas. And so you see a lot of people migrating to the frontier to get in on that cattle trade. And the trails that you see going back and forward and the people that you see traveling all the way across the state and then all the way across to California and coming back, because, of course, you didn't make a whole lot of money in the mines unless you just got really, really lucky. You made a lot of money in California if you were selling goods. And so, of course, our cattle guys are making good money if they don't get greedy and try to get engaged in mining gold, which they do.
I've read a little bit about, we had a fella here in Collin County who went on the gold rush. Mm-hmm. And I'm just amazed that you would leave a wife and children on the frontier with no means of support and be gone a year.
Sure, why not? She's fine. She's got it. Don't worry. Just go on.
Well,
don't also forget that California wasn't the only gold rush that's here. We always forget about Colorado, right? So California 48, 49, Colorado 59. What hits in 61? The Civil War. There's still people up there in Colorado mining gold.
there was a woman, I'm reading a book right now, I just finished it, and she found a stack of letters that her ancestors had written back and forth from Colorado. It's the only time I ever read an account of the gold rush that where both sides were communicating. We always heard from one side or the other, but not both.
Correct.
And it was the only time that they were mourning each other's loss, their loneliness and so forth. That's rare.
Yeah.
They usually didn't care.
Yeah, or they don't have time, or when is the post going to go, or one of the classes you asked about classes I teach gold, silver, and settlement in the Americas. So we trace the gold rushes all the way through, and then the movement of people, and it's just the letters that we find and the movement of animal and people, and all to get this hope, to fill this hope that you're going to strike it rich and
Now,
change
most
your
of the
life.
people here either they walked to California on a horse or whatever.
horse, yeah.
But some of them would go down to Galveston, take a ship down to the Panama or Nicaragua or one of those places and walk over. It's a 50-mile walk, but it's full of snakes and mosquitoes and malaria and everything else. Then catch another. Of course, these aren't certified by the Coast Guard. Take another ship up to San Francisco. And geez.
That was the short route. So you could do that and go down Panama, and you could also go down and cut across the top of Mexico and go across that way. But the long route was all the way down around South America and come up. That was 3 to 4 months, and it was thousands of dollars. Thousands. What are they gambling on? I mean, they're spending everything they've got to go make more, and they're not going to make it, most of them.
Do you know what percentage of them died out there? or on their way?
I have no idea. I will tell you that fewer died from Indian raids than what is generally told, right? We always hear about how the Indians always just attacked all the wagons and did everything else. The U.S. Army made sure that did not happen. And they escorted a lot of those people out there. They built watering stations all the way to California, especially when you see the Gadsden Purchase come in 83 or in 53, excuse me. The U.S. military made sure that this didn't happen. And more often than not, it's white people attacking wagon trains than anything because they know that they can out in the middle of nowhere, right?
Now, this is one thing y'all could do for me. We know very little about the stage route that went from Dallas to McKinney to Sherman and over to Jefferson. We know there's maybe 3 or 4 is all of early stage routes, what they would list the time and day that this particular stage would arrive in these places. Now, there are some on record, but we know a lot about the coaches that went from like El Paso because they were carrying federal mail and that sort of thing.
The Butterfield?
The Butterfield. Those are more carefully documented. What's not documented very well, at least I can't find, is from Dallas to McKinney. And of course I'm interested because it traversed Allen. It traversed Plano. What little we know is from some postage records. And we also know from, and there's a few accounts that, and unlike the stagecoach that went west where they were supposedly, I shouldn't say supposedly, but they would be robbed by bandits and so forth. We didn't see that in this particular stage route. What we saw were getting stuck in the mud. And I mean stuck for days. You're sleeping out on the ground till the creek goes down. And maybe help might come to help pull the stage out of the creek or whatever. That's what we see here. But so what I'm saying is I need help on the stagecoach. Okay, you had a question.
I'm fascinated by the past, but I'm also realize that I am standing at a pivot point personally right now. My mother died a few years ago, and she was a native of San Antonio, lived there her entire life, and my siblings and I are still trying to wrap up. We have boxes and boxes, and I'm the only one wanting to cull through there to take the time to try and find tidbits of information. We did find my mother's baptismal certificate. I think I remember my mom saying at one time she was one of the last people that were baptized at San Jose Mission. And it's written in German. And it's beautiful. It's like 16 by 20. It's huge. And it's got all this beautiful artwork. And I have no idea what to do with
I would
things like
call
that.
I would call a mission and ask them if they're interested in putting it in their archives, first of all, because a lot of times they are very interested in that kind of thing, right? They want those records. There are a lot of German settlements that are interested in those records also. Definitely call Bayhar County. I would start with the Chamber of Commerce and just work my way out, right? Or look online for historical societies around there. A lot of the German counties, or the former, of course, 1840s is when we call it the German counties, when they start getting settled. But a lot of them have archives that they're very interested in collecting. You could also, if you felt the need, get a scanner. You can use your phone to scan some of that, put it in a Dropbox, and have an account where you can pass that on if you need to later. I'm in the same situation. Nobody wants all this stuff. I'm like, why don't you want this stuff, right?
Yeah.
No, we don't want your stuff.
Yeah, nobody wants
her
the
stuff,
China,
right?
much less her
I
baptismal
know,
certificate.
yes. Yeah, that skillet, like Tom was saying, it's at the Goodwill.
They don't want to wash that china.
Right, but definitely if it's if you think it has value, even if you don't think it has value, if it pertains to different things. So for example, the Gordon Center, we collect Industry of Texas documents, right? You may not think it's valuable, but if it's, say, from, I don't know, a blacksmith shop or something like that, that's industry. We want those documents. Don't throw them away, right? Those other things. So find where it might fit and then donate them that way.
I would reiterate to get a copy of it as soon as possible. Either take it to a printer or take a phone picture of it, because you know how many people have lost their stuff to fires, to water leaks, to
Yeah.
edge of the paper.
And put it on the floor.
So
And
yeah.
then take a picture of it, because then you can get the whole thing.
Yeah. And you never know on these documents. It may not be important to you, but could be one little detail that somebody like her is looking for. You know, some kind of verification of name spelling or something like that.
We get all these things in our head, and we're just the same, right? Historians and genealogists, we're all the same breed of people. We're just looking for that little nugget so that we can chase it. I mean, I don't know how many rabbit holes do we go down and we lose sight of what we were actually looking for. But in the meanwhile, we found something better.